My name is Madison Carter, and if you met me 5 years ago, you wouldn't believe the version of me I am now. I was born and raised in San Diego, California, in a small but warm household where my mother was an elementary school teacher and my father ran a modest auto repair shop. They weren't wealthy, but they loved me like I was made of gold. We didn't have fancy vacations or new cars, but we had board game nights, grilled cheese sandwiches, and the kind of laughter that echoes down the hallway even after you've grown up and moved out. Growing up, I was the girl everyone said would make it. I had a scholarship to UCLA, majored in economics, graduated summa cum laude, and went straight into finance. By the age of 25, I was working as a licensed mortgage broker for one of the top firms in Los Angeles. By 28, I had an assistant, a corner office, and my own condo on the 23rd floor of a glass building that overlooked the Pacific. I wore tailored suits, drank black coffee, and could spot a bad loan from a mile away. I was good, no great at what I did. I closed million-dollar deals like clockwork. My colleagues called me the closer. I liked the nickname. Life was structured, efficient, polished. Then Jonas Whitmore walked into a networking event wearing a charcoal suit, confidence in his stride, and a smirk that should have been a red flag. He was a defense attorney, successful and sharp-tongued. The kind of man who made you feel seen even in a room full of people already looking. We hit it off instantly. Dinner dates turned into weekends away, then cohabitation. He moved into my place 6 months after we met. It was fast. Too fast. But I didn't care. Jonas was charming, attentive, ambitious. He'd make me coffee in the mornings, kiss my forehead before I left for work, and tell me, "You're going to take over the world, Mads." I should have noticed the control creeping in, when he started questioning my outfits, the way he side-eyed male colleagues at parties, or how he'd get quiet and withdrawn if I spent too much time with friends. But love has a funny way of blurring lines you'd otherwise never cross. At first it was little things. Him asking why I had to work so late. Suggesting I move to a smaller firm where I'd have less stress. Then came the bigger things. Arguments about money, passive-aggressive remarks about my independence. Till I stayed. Because by then love wasn't just a feeling. It was an anchor I clung to while the storm built quietly beneath the surface. Until the day everything snapped. It was a Tuesday. I'd just closed a deal worth $1.4 million and was riding the high when Jonas showed up at my office, unannounced, demanding to talk. He wanted me to sign a co-ownership agreement for the condo. My condo. The one I'd bought before I even met him. I laughed at first, thinking he was joking. But he wasn't. When I refused, he exploded. "If it wasn't for me, you'd be nothing more than a lonely number cruncher," he spat. "You think this life is all yours? You think people respect you because of you?" That night he packed his things and left. 3 days later I received a letter from the state licensing board. An anonymous tip had been submitted claiming I'd falsified client documents and manipulated loan approvals. Jonas had filed it. I was suspended indefinitely pending investigation. Clients pulled out. My company froze my accounts. My reputation began to dissolve in real time. I tried to fight it. I hired lawyers. I pleaded with HR. But when the press got hold of it, high-profile broker accused of fraud, I became a headline, not a person. Over the next 6 weeks I lost everything. The condo was sold. My savings were drained by legal fees. My phone stopped ringing. People I'd once mentored wouldn't return my messages. I was radioactive. I moved in temporarily with my college best friend Claire in Santa Monica. She had a husband and 2 toddlers, and I tried not to intrude. I cleaned, I cooked, I applied for jobs no one would give me. But after a month of rejections and shame, I realized the inevitable. I couldn't stay there forever. I left her a note on the kitchen table, kissed her kids on the forehead as they slept, and walked out the door just after sunrise. That was the day I became homeless. At first I didn't call it that. I told myself I was between places. I stayed in cheap motels when I could. On friends' couches when they allowed it. Sometimes I slept in my car. But within weeks even those options dried up. The car broke down. The friends stopped answering. There's a moment. If you've ever been through it, you'll recognize. It's not the moment you sleep on a bench or ask for change. It's when you stop lying to yourself about what's happening. It's the moment you sit on a curb in a city that once applauded you holding a bag with your life inside it and whisper to yourself, I don't have a home anymore. That moment changes you. I thought I knew what strength was. Closing million-dollar deals? Please. Strength is going into a public restroom, locking the door and trying not to cry as you clean yourself with hand soap and paper towels. Strength is swallowing your pride every time someone looks past you like you're invisible. Strength is surviving. That first week I kept to myself. I sat outside coffee shops pretending to wait for someone just so I could feel normal. I wrote notes on napkins about things I needed to do, even though there was no one left to call. One evening while sitting behind a grocery store I met Tamika. She was maybe 35, wearing a jacket 3 sizes too big with a baby stroller that had no baby, just blankets, water bottles, and crackers. She handed me a granola bar without a word. We didn't talk much that day, but she came back the next. With her came Leo, a tall, broad man in his 50s with faded military tattoos and a surprisingly gentle smile. Then came Julian, barely 21, carrying a beat-up guitar and eyes too tired for someone that young. They became my people. My accidental family. And though I didn't know it yet, they were about to teach me something no Ivy League classroom or corporate office ever could. They were about to teach me how to survive when the world forgets you exist. The first real night I spent on the street, I didn't sleep. I found a spot behind a dumpster near a strip mall that stayed lit through the night. I thought the light would make me feel safe. It didn't. I curled up on my side, the concrete pressing into my hip, my blazer bundled beneath my head like a pillow. I clutched my bag so tight my hands cramped. Every passing car made me flinch. Every rustle in the bushes had me holding my breath. I kept waiting for someone to come. Security, police, a stranger with bad intentions. But no one came. And somehow that was worse. When morning finally arrived, I stood up slowly, every joint aching, and walked into a Starbucks across the street. The barista didn't recognize me. I used to come here 3 times a week in pencil skirts and red lipstick, phone in one hand, latte in the other. Today I walked in with tangled hair, sunken cheeks, and the same clothes I'd worn for 3 days straight. She smiled anyway and asked, "What can I get started for you?" I smiled back. "I'm just using the bathroom." I locked the stall door and stared at myself in the mirror. That face, it was mine but not. Pale, drawn, eyes red from lack of sleep and the ache of silent crying. I washed my face with soap from the wall dispenser and dried it with scratchy paper towels. Dignity became a game of inches. Over the next few weeks, I learned that survival was built on patterns. I figured out which grocery stores threw away sealed food at the end of the day and when. I learned which churches handed out hygiene kits and where to find the soup kitchens that didn't make you sit through a sermon first. And most importantly, I learned the faces. The ones like Tamika, who shared her peanut butter crackers without asking questions. The ones like Leo, who walked with a limp but never let anyone see him wince. The ones like Julian, who played his guitar in front of the train station, collecting quarters and compliments with equal grace. They never asked me what I used to do. That was the unspoken rule. You didn't dig into the before. What mattered was now. Were you cold? Did you eat? Did you need shoes? So I think they sensed it. That I was new. That the ink on my fall hadn't even dried yet. It was Tamika who pulled me aside one night. We were sitting outside a 24-hour laundromat, sharing a bottle of water. Her eyes were sharp, but her voice was soft. "You walk like a house just got dropped on your back," she said. I gave a dry laugh. Close. More like a house, a job, and my entire sense of self-worth. She didn't blink. "You gonna carry all that forever?" The question hit harder than I expected. I had been holding everything, grief, guilt, shame, as if keeping it close would somehow protect me. Or maybe punish me. "I don't know how to let go," I admitted. Tamika nodded. "Then learn." The truth was, I didn't just lose my job or my apartment. I lost my identity. I had built my entire life on achievement. Every promotion, every client win, every Instagram-worthy brunch. I measured my worth by output, by success, by applause. Now I was invisible. Worse, I was seen but only through a filter of assumption. People looked at me and saw laziness, mental illness, addiction, failure. They didn't see a woman who once helped single mothers refinance their homes. They didn't see the daughter who used to send her mom flowers every birthday, or the woman who kept a bottle of champagne in her fridge, just in case life called for celebrating. No one saw that Madison anymore. Not even me. One afternoon I walked past a newsstand and saw Jonas's face on a magazine. Whitmore Legal expands into Silicon Valley, the headline read. There he was, smiling like a man who'd never filed a false report. Like a man who didn't destroy someone's life because she dared say, no. I stared at it for a long time. I waited to feel rage. But all I felt was nothing. He had moved on. He had power. A penthouse. Press coverage. And I had a dented thermos and a cardboard sign I hadn't yet brought myself to use. Later that night I found a bench in a small park just off Pico Boulevard. It was quieter there. Safer. I curled up and stared at the stars through the canopy of trees. Then I whispered, "You win." I wasn't talking to Jonas. I was talking to the part of me that still believed I could go back. To the old life. To the old Madison. Because in that moment I realized something. She was gone. And maybe that was okay. A week later everything changed. It was a Monday. Overcast. A little cold. Julian was strumming his guitar softly on the sidewalk. Leo was reading an old paperback with half the cover missing. Tamika was organizing socks she'd gotten from a church handout. I was sitting with them, drinking instant coffee out of a chipped mug, when a woman in a navy trench coat approached. She wasn't a cop. Too calm. She wasn't from the city either. Her badge read Community Resource Outreach. Her name was Sienna Brooks. She asked if we needed anything. Blankets, water, flu kits. Then she looked at me and said, You look like you used to work in an office. I froze. I did, I said cautiously. A long time ago. She smiled gently. We're short-staffed at the outreach center. Need someone to help with intake forms. You interested? The offer felt like someone had handed me a rope when I didn't even realize I was still sinking. I nodded. And just like that, a crack of light broke through. That was the first step. A small job, a small desk, and a small reason to believe I still had value. But the path ahead was far from smooth. There were still nights I didn't sleep. Still mornings I woke up hungry. Still shame that crept in every time I walked past someone who looked like the old me. But the difference? Now I wasn't alone. I had Tamika, Julian, Leo, and now Sienna. I had purpose even if it was borrowed. Even if it was just for 3 hours a day helping a stranger find a bed or filling out a form for someone too tired to spell their name. It was enough. The outreach center was no palace. But to me it was a second chance disguised as a folding table and a cluttered office. They gave me a volunteer badge, a locker for my things, and a desk wedged between 2 old filing cabinets. My job? Help process walk-ins, fill out housing forms, input IDs into a sluggish computer system, answer questions I was barely qualified to handle. I loved it. For those 3 hours a day I had a place to go. A reason to wake up. People called me ma'am. They thanked me. Some even smiled when they left. I mattered again even if it was just a sliver of the day. But once I stepped back out onto the sidewalk, everything changed. There I was no longer Madison the intake assistant. I was just another woman with cracked lips and worn shoes, looking for a patch of sidewalk to claim for the night. People often think homelessness is just about lacking a roof. It's not. It's about invisibility. Dehumanization. The erosion of self, inch by painful inch. You start to apologize for existing. For taking up space. For breathing too loudly in a coffee shop where you're just hoping to charge your phone. I watched people cross the street to avoid me. I saw parents clutch their children tighter when Julian played guitar too close to the park. I saw men leer at Tamika like she was an object on clearance, and others treat Leo like he was a threat just for existing. The cruelest part? You begin to believe it. You begin to think maybe you deserve this. That's why we clung to each other. Tamika became my anchor. She had street smarts I didn't. She could scan a crowd and know within seconds who to trust and who to avoid. She taught me how to wrap my shoes in plastic bags before it rained. She showed me how to build a makeshift door out of cardboard, just enough to deter passers-by. Julian, with his beat-up guitar and quiet fire, reminded me how to laugh. He'd play old Beatles songs and hum lullabies on nights none of us could sleep. He was a college dropout, yes, but also a poet. His notebooks were full of lyrics written under streetlights, next to poems about stars and sisters he missed. And Leo was something else entirely. A former Marine. Served 2 tours in Iraq. Came back with a limp and a broken heart. The VA failed him like it failed so many. But he never complained. He carried an old paperback everywhere, To Kill a Mockingbird, and quoted Atticus Finch like scripture. He was the one who found me the night I almost broke. It was late. I'd gotten off from the center after helping process an emergency shelter case. A young woman barely 18 trying to escape her stepfather. I don't know why that case hit me harder than the others, but it did. Maybe because I saw myself in her. Or maybe because no matter how many hours I volunteered, it never felt like enough. That night, I made the mistake of sleeping alone. My group had scattered. Tamika went to visit a sister in Compton, Julian had a gig busking uptown, and Leo had found a temporary shelter slot. I set up behind a gas station. It was poorly lit, but the wind was calm. Around 2 a.m. I woke to someone kicking my foot. It wasn't a cop. It was a man, maybe mid-30s, scruffy, wired with the kind of wild energy that made my stomach twist. He reeked of something chemical. His eyes were wide, unfocused. He asked if I had food. I said no. Then he asked if I had money. I shook my head. He crouched closer. Pretty thing, like you shouldn't be alone out here, he said, voice slurred. I clutched my bag and stood quickly. Leave me alone. But he didn't. He lunged. Not to hit but to scare. It worked. I stumbled back and hit the dumpster. Hard. And then out of nowhere, Leo appeared. He stepped between us, didn't say a word. Just stood there, eyes locked with the man, body taut like a spring. The man cursed, spat, and eventually backed off. When it was over, Leo helped me sit down. I was shaking so hard I couldn't speak. He didn't ask questions. He just took off his jacket and draped it over my shoulders. I shouldn't have been alone, I whispered. You shouldn't have to think that way, he replied. That night changed something in me. Not just the fear, but the realization that this life, as fragile as it was, had become mine. I couldn't keep pretending it was temporary. This was reality now. So I started treating it like one. I found routines. Mapped the cleanest public bathrooms, the safest alleyways, the kindest business owners who didn't shoo us away. And for the first time I started speaking up, at the outreach center with Sienna. I told her about Tamika's daughter needing asthma meds. I told her Julian needed a new guitar strap because his was held together with duct tape. I told her Leo's VA claim was denied. Again. And she listened. She connected me with a legal clinic for Leo, a medical van for Tamika, and a local music nonprofit that gave Julian a new strap and a slot at an open mic night. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was advocating. One morning as I was filing intakes, Sienna approached my desk. You ever think about going full-time? She asked. I blinked. I'm homeless, I said. I don't even have a mailing address. He shrugged. Doesn't mean you can't be capable. Or brilliant. I didn't say yes right away. I was scared. Scared to hope again. Scared that if I reached for too much, it'd all vanish. But a week later I gave her my answer. Yes. I want to try. That night, Julian played Here Comes the Sun on the sidewalk while Tamika and I sang along. Leo pretended to hate it, but I saw his foot tapping. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a ghost walking the edge of the world. The first time I saw Julian on stage was in the back room of a rundown community cafe called Rustwood Grounds. They hosted open mic nights every other Thursday, mostly filled with amateur poets and grungy guitarists who couldn't afford recording equipment. Julian stood under a cracked ceiling fan and played a song he wrote called Ghosts and Streetlights. It was soft, melancholy, beautiful. And when the last chord hung in the air, no one clapped right away. Because we were stunned. Then came the applause, quiet at first, then wild. He stepped down from the stage like he hadn't just exposed every raw nerve inside of him. Afterward, I hugged him and whispered, "You made us feel seen." Julian looked surprised. I didn't think anyone would get it. I didn't think anyone would get me, I said back. That night, I walked to the outreach center with a different kind of heaviness. Not the kind that weighed me down. The kind that reminded me I still had pieces worth carrying. Sienna was there late, going through inventory. When she saw me, she motioned me into her office. "I want to talk to you about something," she said. I held my breath. "We've been approved for a new grant. It'll let us hire a paid administrative assistant. Someone who knows the intake system, already trained. Someone like you." I stared at her. My mind couldn't catch up. A real job? With hours? And a paycheck? "I don't even have a resume anymore," I said quietly. "I've seen you work," she replied. "That's all the resume I need." I took the job. Not because I felt ready, but because I was terrified not to. It was part-time at first, just 20 hours a week, but it was something. I filed paperwork, helped organize food drives, translated applications for unhoused individuals who struggled with forms, and kept meticulous spreadsheets. Sienna trusted me with the books. She gave me access to donation tracking, supply ordering, and eventually volunteer training. Piece by piece, she handed me responsibility. And I didn't drop a single one. Because somewhere between intake forms and late-night coffee, I remembered who I was. Not the woman who had a penthouse or a six-figure salary, but the one who could build something real even with nothing. Outside of work, life was still hard. I still had to line up at shelters most nights. Still had to wash my socks in gas station sinks. Still jumped when a stranger walked too close. But now I had a locker. A staff lanyard. A badge with my name on it. It was fragile, this new life, but it was real. And then came the next hit. Tamika's daughter Lily had a severe asthma attack. They had just been moved into transitional housing. Shared space, thin walls, barely functioning air filters. It was supposed to be safer than the street. Tamika ran 6 blocks carrying Lily to the nearest ER because she couldn't afford an ambulance. She called me from the hospital, sobbing. Lily was stable, but they were told she needed daily medication and a proper living environment or risk future attacks. "We can't go back there," Tamika said, her voice breaking. "But I have nowhere else." I went to Sienna. I told her everything. Within hours, she pulled strings through a network of shelters and secured them a spot in a family-based housing unit run by a faith-based nonprofit. The place wasn't perfect, but it had clean air, working vents, and a locked door. That night, I brought Tamika her things. We sat on the edge of her new cot, Lily asleep beside us, and cried. Happy tears. Relieved tears. And for the first time in a long time, hopeful tears. But life has a way of testing your courage just when it starts to return. A few weeks later, Sienna called me into her office again. "There's a program," she said. "It's called Women Rise LA. It helps women re-enter the workforce, especially those who've faced homelessness or abuse. I think you'd be a perfect candidate." I hesitated. I already work here. This would be bigger. Full-time. Career path. They even offer transitional housing if you qualify. I nodded slowly, heart pounding. "What's the catch?" She smiled. "An interview. And background checks." The blood drained from my face. I still have that article online. The fraud accusation. The suspension. "We'll explain the truth," she said. "The charges were dropped, right? After they destroyed everything." Sienna touched my hand. "Then let's rebuild." The interview was scheduled for Friday. I borrowed a blouse from the donation bin, pressed it under a stack of books, and practiced mock answers with Leo and Julian. The morning of, I walked into the downtown office of Women Rise LA with my chin high and hands shaking. The interview panel was polite. Professional. They asked about my skills, my past roles, my volunteer work at the center. Then came the final question. "We did find an article from 3 years ago regarding an investigation. Can you tell us about that?" I felt my stomach twist. I opened my mouth to speak. But then, "If I may." The voice came from behind me. I turned. Claire. My college best friend. The woman who had taken me in when everything fell apart. Who I had left with only a note and a thank you. She stood in the doorway, eyes locked on mine. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said to the panel. "But I'd like to submit a written statement on behalf of Madison Carter. I've known her for over 15 years. She is not only innocent, but one of the most capable, honest, and determined women I've ever known. The room was quiet. My eyes filled with tears. I didn't know how she found me, or how she even knew about the interview. But I knew then what I'd forgotten in the chaos of loss. I wasn't alone. Not anymore. That night I returned to the park bench, not to sleep but to sit. To remember. To let the old Madison finally rest. I was no longer the woman who'd lost everything. I was the woman who was rebuilding, brick by brick, truth by truth, hand by trembling hand. 3 days after the interview I received the call. "Congratulations," the woman on the line said. "We'd love to welcome you to the Women Rise LA program." My knees gave out and I had to sit on the curb to keep from collapsing. I was in. Not just accepted but wanted. They offered me a small studio in a transitional housing facility. 4 walls, a bed, a lock on the door. It was the first space I could call mine in nearly a year. I stood in the middle of the room for 10 minutes just staring at the light switch. I had electricity, running water, privacy. Felt like a mansion. The program itself was intense. Every day began at 7 a.m. with workshops. Financial literacy, trauma recovery, resume building, digital skills, public speaking. We learned how to interview, how to network, how to rebuild a life from the ground up. For the first few weeks, I walked with my shoulders high, trying to fake the confidence I once wore so effortlessly. But it wasn't faking forever. Slowly, the mask fused with my face again, not out of pretense but recognition. I was still me. Different, bruised, scarred, but still me. One afternoon, they brought in a guest speaker. Marcia Levine, founder of a nonprofit that offered administrative support services to community organizations. After her talk, I approached her. "I used to be a mortgage broker," I said. "Now I'm trying to find where I fit in this new version of my life." She studied me for a second. "You're the one Claire told me about, aren't you?" I blinked. "She's on our board," Marcia said, smiling. "She mentioned you might stop by." By the end of the week, I was placed in an internship at her nonprofit, Clerical Core, helping low-income clients with documentation, budgeting, and office navigation. I didn't just love it. I thrived in it. I knew how to talk to clients, how to explain forms, how to calm someone down with just my tone. My mind, my instincts, my presence, they hadn't disappeared. They'd just gone silent for a while. Meanwhile, life was blooming outside the office too. Tamika and Lily had settled into their apartment. It wasn't big, but it was clean, warm, and safe. Lily's asthma was under control, and Tamika was now training as a caregiver at a local senior center. Julian, after that cafe performance, had been invited to record a set of songs at a local community studio. A volunteer at the outreach center even started a GoFundMe to help him buy better equipment. And Leo, quiet, protective Leo, finally received approval from the VA for a full disability package. It wasn't justice, but it was acknowledgement. He moved into a tiny duplex near downtown, and every Thursday we still met at the park just to sit together and talk about books and life. The family we'd built on the edge of the world? Now we were rebuilding together. I remember the day I received my first real paycheck. I didn't cash it right away. I stared at it for a long time. Not because of the amount, it was modest, but because of the name typed neatly in the upper left corner. Madison Carter. I cried. Not because I missed the past, but because I finally felt proud of the present. Weeks passed. Then months. And then one day I was asked to do something I never expected. Sienna called me into the office and said, "We'd like you to speak at the upcoming Housing Equity Summit. Share your story. What you've overcome. What it's taught you." I wanted to say no. I still hated being the center of attention. Still hated the memories. But something inside me whispered, "Tell the truth. Let people know we exist." So I said yes. I spent days preparing. I wrote and rewrote, practicing in front of the mirror, in front of Tamika and Julian and even Leo, who gave me the best advice I've ever received. Don't speak like a survivor. Speak like a witness. The day of the summit, I wore a navy blue blazer donated by a retired lawyer. My hair was neat, my shoes polished, my nerves buzzing. I stood behind the podium, looked out at rows of polished professionals and policymakers, and I told them everything. The job I lost. The man who lied. The bench I slept on. The people who saved me. The system that forgot us. And the power of one cracked door. I ended with this. We don't need saviors. We need people who see us. People who believe that dignity is not a reward for success, but a right every human being deserves, especially when we're at our lowest. I didn't survive because I was stronger than anyone else. I survived because someone let me in. So today I'm asking you, leave your doors cracked open. You never know who might be standing on the other side. The room was silent. Then applause. Then one by one people came up to shake my hand. A few cried. All listened. That night, back in my tiny studio, I opened my journal and wrote. I think I'm healing. Not fully. Not forever. But enough to see the light again. Strange how quickly life can settle into something that feels like peace. I still woke up early, my body trained by a year of living on park benches and church steps. But now I rose to the soft hum of a heater, the quiet purr of a working refrigerator, and sunlight slipping through curtains instead of harsh neon from street lamps. I made coffee every morning. Real coffee. Not gas station instant packets. I kept the mug warm between my hands like a ritual. Not because it tasted amazing but because it meant I was safe. And I'd sit in that small second-hand chair by the window and write. Sometimes in my journal. Sometimes in long posts I'd share anonymously on forums or outreach blogs. Stories. Memories. Truths no one wanted to hear but everyone needed to know. It was Sienna who first said, you should turn these into something permanent. I shrugged it off. They're just thoughts. No, she said. They're witness accounts. They're survival guides. And you write like someone who's lived every damn line. I began turning my posts into essays. Then essays into a series. Then one day, Claire helped me self-publish my first small e-book. Bent, Not Broken. Stories from the Sidewalk. It didn't go viral. It didn't hit any bestseller lists. But it made it to the inbox of a producer from a small local radio show. And 2 weeks later I was invited to speak live, share my story and take calls from listeners. The segment was called Second Chances. I'll never forget the final caller. A woman, soft-voiced, said, I see them every day. The people sleeping on benches. I never knew how to help. I just kept walking. But I won't anymore. Thank you for making me stop. I cried after the show. Because for the first time my pain had created change. A few months later, I was sitting in a meeting room helping design a new mentorship program for women exiting homelessness. We were going over eligibility guidelines when Sienna walked in holding a manila envelope. Mail for you, she said, smiling. I opened it. Inside was a letter and a court summons. Jonas Whitmore was under federal investigation. Bank fraud. Misappropriation of client funds. Multiple victims. The charges matched the exact patterns I'd once been accused of. There was a note attached from a legal rep. As a prior associate impacted by similar allegations, we welcome your testimony, if you're willing. I stared at it for a long time. Not with fear. Not with vengeance. Just clarity. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need his downfall. But I needed to speak. To clear my name not for the world but for myself. In court I wore the same blazer I'd worn at the Housing Equity Summit. Jonas didn't recognize me at first. I was no longer the woman he'd crushed. No longer the trembling mess scraping together shelter space. I was whole. I took the stand. Told the truth. Not just about what happened but what it did to me, how I unraveled, how I rebuilt. The jury listened. The judge thanked me. And when it was over I stepped outside into sunlight. A free woman, in every sense. That night, we gathered in Julian's new apartment. As he had one now. His GoFundMe had led to a grant. His grant to a residency. His residency to a small record deal. He played us his first finished track, Sky Under My Feet. We toasted with cheap wine in plastic cups. Leo brought cookies. Tamika danced with Lily in the kitchen. And I sat on the floor watching them all, this strange, perfect family the world had once thrown away. None of us were where we started. But we were exactly where we needed to be. A year later I stood outside a new building, the Carter House. Funded by donations. Run by volunteers. A safe transitional home for homeless women and children. My name was on the plaque, but all I saw were the names of those who'd carried me here. Hannah, Claire, Julian, Leo, Tinga, even Jonas. Because sometimes, the people who break us are the reason we find out how deeply we can heal. I still volunteer. Still speak at events. Still sit on park benches. Not because I have to, but because someone else might. Someone scared. Someone hurting. Someone who needs to hear, I've been there. And I'm still standing. If you're reading this, maybe you're there now. Maybe your world fell apart quietly, piece by silent piece. Maybe you feel invisible. But hear me, you're not. There's a door. Maybe just a crack. But it's there. And when you're ready, push it open.